to Art, Climate Change, and the Louisiana Landscape. My name is Megan. I will be your festival director for the day and for tomorrow and Saturday as well. All right, so for those of you who haven't heard the spiel, we are trying to celebrate local independent booksellers. All the local independent booksellers we can. So we have Tubby Coos out front. If there is a speaker who has a book out, Tubby and Coos is selling it. But when we moved here, we had to recognize we are next door to Community Book Center. It is a beloved institution, and we have to support them as well. So at every session, we are giving away a $25 Community Book Center gift card. So you can go buy festival books here, and then go buy different books next door, and celebrate two wonderful local independent booksellers. So I have a randomizer. If you were registered for this session, I automatically entered you into this drawing. And the winner for this session, Ellen Rosenberg. Ellen? Everyone's going twice. Fortunately, we have a runner-up. All right. Susan Kagan? Susan, you have won a gift card. All right, so this festival could not be a thing without the support of so many generous individuals and businesses and institutions and foundations, one of which is the Foundation for Louisiana. And here to tell us a little bit more about what they do are Dania and Amelia. So welcome.
Hey y'all, I am Tamia Kambubi Delahuse. I am a Racial Justice Program Officer at Foundation for Louisiana.
Y'all, Amelia Dinagra. I'm also with the Foundation as our Climate Justice Program Officer. And we're so grateful to be here with y'all today. We both have a tendency to ramble, so you're going to see us with our phones, because otherwise you're going to be stuck with us all day. So we wanted to talk a little bit about the intersection of climate and art before we give you all the stage to tell us more about your process. And when we're thinking about this, I was really thinking about how when we were growing up, we only heard about climate change in the context of polar bears and ice caps, but never really about the impact of climate change on people. But Louisiana really is a place where the impact of climate is really evident. The impact of climate on people is evident. And Louisianans have a deep connection to place and to land. Our rich culture is rooted in traditions that were born out of our different communities' relationship with land. The relationship of the indigenous communities that have been tending to this land since before the European colonization, the relationship of people who were uprooted, enslaved, and brought to toil this land, the relationship of Acadian refugees who came to this land to protect and preserve their culture, and the relationships that were formed by newer immigrants and as these communities blended together. Climate change has intensified the frequency and intensity of hurricanes that take lives, imperil livelihoods, and damage our homes and communities. Climate change has caused sea levels to rise so that our coast disappears into the ocean at an increasing speed, and salt water creeps up, threatening freshwater sources that support us and the plant and animal life that we depend on. Climate change has led to harsher droughts that tax our farmers and workers, as well as heavy rains that drown seedlings and flood cities in the blink of an eye. As our coast disappears, and with it our ability to shrimp, fish, and be nourished in body and soul by the waterways, as our communities take a beating from hurricanes and are faced with the difficult decision to rebuild or retreat, as our home and flood insurance rates continue to rise in response to ever-growing threats of natural disasters, forcing displacement even when there is no natural disaster to respond to. Louisiana leaders and artists have been ringing the bells to bring awareness to our challenges and vulnerabilities, and the need to come together to adapt and protect our communities, our towns, our people, our culture, from the pressures of climate change. Louisiana is leaderful. We have some of the most innovative leaders in social justice movements rooted in tradition while embracing change to ensure that our culture continues to thrive amidst the chaos and change that comes with global climate disruptions. Some of these leaders organize and educate communities. Some develop and advocate for policies. Some plant trees in the marshes and repurpose oyster shells to rebuild our coast. Some leaders are artists. Artists who serve as messengers, as mirrors, as truth tellers, and as anchors. They open our eyes to what is ours to protect, and they invite us to imagine expansively what is possible.
And that's exactly why the role of artists and culture bearers in our justice movements is so powerful. I've had the honor of supporting artists and culture bearers advancing racial justice for over 15 years. And I've seen firsthand how they help us not only imagine new possibilities, but move us toward them. They help us process change. They help us make meaning and inspire us to recognize our shared humanity. The songs of protest that carry movements forward, the graphic art that communicates demands for a better world, the performance art that makes inequity impossible to ignore, and the writers and poets who give voice to the voiceless. This is the work that opens hearts, builds empathy, and moves people to act. At Foundation for Louisiana, we understand the power of art and culture as essential to creating a more just and equitable Louisiana. Artists and culture bearers are fundamental to strengthening movements by building people power and shifting narratives by telling the truth about our past and the future we want to see. They reflect the realities communities are living through and help us imagine futures rooted in care, connection, and possibility. Art has been an integral part of the justice work Foundation for Louisiana has resourced across the state to advance racial justice, climate justice, and criminal legal reform. For example, we've supported organizations creating zines highlighting the experience of Southwest Louisiana residents affected by environmental racism. Documentaries exposing health disparities faced by Black birthing people, a multimedia storytelling project celebrating Asian American Pacific Islander contributions to Louisiana, a youth-led dance performance addressing social justice issues in New Orleans, and a poetry slam promoting racial healing for teens in Baton Rouge. And these are just a few examples of the powerful artistic work we've been really proud to support. This understanding of the power of art and culture is also why our World Makers program exists. World Makers is a fund that supports artists and culture bearers, grounded in the belief that resourcing them to do their work is essential to the cultural, social, political, and ecological well-being of Louisiana. It's especially exciting to see two of our 2024 World Makers on the stage, Hali and Sunpie. And I just want to say that I'm grateful to all of you, all of the artists and culture bearers who show up every day for your communities. And so we're looking forward to this conversation and exploring more deeply how art and artists shape a future of a more just and equitable Louisiana. Thank y'all so much.
And this would not have been possible without the imagination and vision of Stacey Balkun, our curator and moderator for this program. Climate change is very important to Stacey. She grew up very close to the Union Carbide plant in New Jersey. And the effects of that plant are very evident in her poetry collection, Sweet Bitter. Before Sweet Bitter, she co-authored Filet and Wing. It's an anthology of domestic fabulous poetry. She's also the author of Lost City Museum and Jackalope Girl Learns to Speak. Dr. Balkun got her PhD from Mississippi in Oxford. See, I'm getting choked up because she's so wonderful. And, I'm going to rip off E.B. White, which I always do when I introduce Stacey, and say that rarely does one come along who is both a good friend and a good writer, but Stacey is both.
Wow, thank you, Megan. Thank you to our ambassadors. That was such a great framework for this panel. I was thinking today, how do I set the stage for this? And that was, so much was said that was so important to say. Welcome to Art, Climate Change, and Louisiana Landscape. please take a second and make sure your phone's silent so we don't have that interruption. Feel free to move around if you need to sneak in or sneak out, just we ask that you be respectful. And I am so honored to share the stage with these 5 brilliant artists, culture bearers, and change makers who use their skills, visions, and platforms to bring awareness and change to this complicated landscape that we call home. I'm going to do some short intros. You can read more about all these folks on our website. On stage, we have Bruce Sunpie Barnes, musician, Big Chief of the Northside Skull and Bone Gang, former park ranger, former biology teacher, and NFL player. Jack Bedell, author, educator, editor, and former Louisiana poet laureate. Hali Dardar, full multimedia artist and language preservationist. Frank Relle, photographer, who uses his unique vision to share the beauty, culture, and history of New Orleans and Southern Louisiana. And Brad Richard, masterful poet, community leader, and gardener. Yes, give it up to I'm truly in awe to be in this company. Please stay in touch, look these folks up. Their awards and accomplishments are immense. I'm grateful to their dedication to our home place and for sharing their time here today. Just to keep going on this conversation that was started with our introduction, the author Rob Nixon uses the term slow violence to describe environmental change that may be hidden or disguised but has lasting effects. Noting that conventional art forms may fail to convey those complications. Something I think is especially true for Louisiana's ecologies and cultures. Each of these folks on stage takes a creative, if not unconventional approach to art, which translates that more than human world into something bespoke, intriguing. Can you each speak briefly about how your work approaches the environment, and then we'll get into conversation.
Okay, well, welcome everyone. Good to see y'all. Glad to be in the land of the living. Considered alternatives. For me, you know, it's like I've never tried to separate. I've always tried to be inclusive in who and what I was around the environments that I live in. And I'm a constant, curious investigator of all things around me, and just talking to you about taking a walk in the woods. When was the last time you took a walk in some wild places? Get away from the city, be able to breathe deep and let yourself not visit a place, but be a part of it. So it's around, for me, is when I'm in wild spaces, no matter where they are, you know, it could be the duck off or, you know, AP Turo, that's a wild space. Or it could be in the middle of, you know, a forest, and I like to be a part of it, not be invasive, never view myself as being a visitor in the place, but to be a part of the environment.
So, thanks so much. Thanks for being here. And I think one of the things that I like is, or think about, is transparency and flatness, and thinking about why are hierarchies we make and why, and as an interaction designer, really critically analyzing those. And so one of them is Stacey. How long do we have to talk about this? Okay. I have a 7-minute video. Is that too long, or is that maybe another moment? Okay. All right. Yeah. So, is this a good time for it, or should I do that later?
I don't talk about it.
Okay, that's okay. Yeah, transparency and interaction. Yeah, and so I'm really interested in what is the context that we provide when we say things, and then also thinking about what memory systems we're interacting with. Is it the ones that we are kind of given to us, or is it the ones that fit naturally within us, and how do we make those two kind of ends meet? So just thinking a lot about what are the mediums that we use, what are the metaphors we use when we communicate, and what are the words that we're using, and how the precision of those words really frame the context of what's going on.
So I've spent my whole adult life writing about Terrebonne Parish and Lafourche Parish, and I'm just thinking about being considering myself of that place. I think of this Mark German quote of, because I'm of a place, I write with love about it. And that's kind of how I spent my whole adult life. And thinking about the environment, I mean, like you said, it was a part of life. It was an everyday thing to interact and to be part of the outdoors in South Louisiana. And the buzzwords that I heard constantly throughout my childhood were conservation and preservation. And when I started writing, that was really my goal. I mean, I use the term archive, but I mean, it's the same. It's really a facet of that, where I've always seen my poems as archives of the land, of the people, of the traditions, and I think that's what drove me early through my career. But in the last decade or so, our leaders, particularly like Governor Edwards, was able to help in the effort to go beyond preservation and conservation and into restoration. And it changed how I write, because there's some hope in this notion of restoration, whether it's Queen Bess or Elmer's Island, or the work that they're doing inland, right near here in the east, or like offshore in Pointe-à-Change. There's the restorative kind of result of those activities and those efforts really has led my writing in a new direction, where I can look, instead of focusing so much on the now and recording things. It's been a real blessing to be able to think in terms of the future, especially given some of the bad news that we get on the daily. It's really changed how I write, how I approach writing about the environment. This notion of restoration and how we're trying to put back, we're trying to rebuild, we're trying to change our environment in positive ways. And I think my writing can reflect that in a way that, if two people get involved, having read my stuff, I feel like I'm moving in the right direction. And that really is the controlling factor in why I write what I write and why I write at all.
Thank you. I'm Frank Relle. I'd like to thank Stacey for bringing me here. It wasn't an easy effort. I came somewhat unwillingly, because it makes me nervous to try to use specific words to say what I'm trying to express. I end up sometimes, especially if we were talking just one-on-one, I'll run my mouth off and say all kind of stuff. But when I start talking in a group, I quickly feel overwhelmed with trying to choose the right words. And that's the reason why I chose photography as my medium, because the silence of the photographic image I felt was able to express things that oftentimes I would fail to express when I tried to write or tried to speak about it in public. I love what Bruce said about going to wild spaces, and one of the things I love about being in wild spaces is that it erases my words. I'm struck into presence when I'm around the trees and the birds and the water. And there is something very powerful about just arriving into the present moment without all of our words and concepts. And I know we're here at the Words and Music Festival. One of the reasons why I love words and music, the poetry of Brad and Jack here, Ross, who I go out into the swamp with, who's my assistant, we use their poems to kind of help us arrive to the place. So it's very exciting to be up here with y'all, because your words and the way that you are able to use your craft to reveal things that are beyond the way sometimes words can make you feel narrow, the way that you're able to expand. Anyway, it's very exciting to share the stage with y'all, and I'm looking forward to the discussion. Stacey, Hali kind of asked already, as far as format, one of the things I want to share with y'all is my photographs, but just let us know when it's appropriate to shift into that presentation. So yeah. Okay, yeah. Thank you.
I know I kind of shifted on us because we have lunch time.
Hi, welcome again, everybody. It's so great to be sharing the stage with this incredible group. If I were just reading my poems, I would not be nervous at all. But since I have to talk about a subject, I am nervous. So please forgive me, I wrote it out. It's brief. Let's take about 3 minutes. I'm calling this gardening and social change. The part of my environment that I'm most intimately familiar with is my garden. That's a rather small sample size, but since I'm here as a poet, not a scientist, I hope I can make a case for why my garden matters and why yours does too. For the most part, the plants that I grow are native to our region, species that are best suited for creatures that are also local natives. In nurturing this habitat, this backyard community, I accept my place in it as the least important citizen. Sure, gardening gives me a lot of pleasure. But ultimately, I do not garden for myself, but for all the other living things it nurtures and sustains. Every monarch, fritillary, swallowtail, bee, wasp, dragonfly, hummingbird, stink bug, sow bug, beetle, worm, and fungus. It's my small part of preserving history and culture at the ecological level. And if enough of us follow suit, it makes more of a difference than we might imagine. Gardening does strange things to gardeners. Recently, I've discovered that I've developed a callus on my right knee from kneeling on it so often on my garden path or the sidewalk while pulling weeds. I also find myself just staring at things. A bee harvesting pollen from the impossibly long, impossibly red flower of the giant red Turk's cap, stink bugs mating on a salvia, a bare patch of earth just cleared of weeds and overgrown plants where I'm trying to imagine what to plant. What's the right thing? What will be best for all of us? I think attention is as crucial a quality for a gardener as the urge to nurture. Attention to what's present, what came before, what's needed, what you suddenly realize has been missing. Without that attention, nurture has no ethical purpose, no reason to think about what you must attend to and why. In last night's panel discussion of the book and exhibit Captive State, Dr. Andrea Armstrong talked at one point about the importance of proximity, of placing ourselves in the spaces where incarcerated people have no choice but to be, in order to understand their lives and our responsibility to them, to learn what they need and how we can help. We should also place ourselves in proximity to people who need protection from CBP and ICE, especially urgent at this very moment in this town. In a very different or perhaps adjacent way, I think we need to be intentional about our proximity to the natural world. When you are standing on a lush, nicely trimmed lawn, please think about its foreignness in our landscape and the resources that that single non-native species requires in order to stay healthy. Resources that could be supporting dozens upon dozens of other species, including ours. You don't see bees in lawn grass. You have to make that space welcoming to them. Not unlike the ways freedom has to be fought for in a police state. A vague but urgent hope I have is that encouraging that kind of attention to the natural world around us and considering the wisdom of planting, say, a late boneset or a Yopon holly instead of chrysanthemums or privet can also help us imagine better choices in our interactions with one another. In other words, that we might imagine better, more nurturing ideas of economics and politics.
This guy's very comfortable using his words. That was amazing. Thank you, Brad. What happens now?
you want to do your photographs and see their work?
Sure. JC, do we have queued up the silent? Yeah. Okay, so we don't have a clicker. So I'm going to just tell y'all briefly what I'm thinking here. I recently went to a photo show at ICP in New York. It was an Edward Bertinsky show. If you've never seen his photographs, they're amazing. They're large-scale demonstrations of how good human beings are at destroying planet Earth. Deeply uncomfortable experience, but also mesmerizing. And in the wall text, the curator wrote that each of the photographs could have a different meaning depending on the caption. The words that we put underneath the photographs change how we interpret them. And one of the things I like about photography is when the photographs speak without any words, because they can invite perspectives broader than the one that I bring to them, which is oftentimes can be limiting, because as the photographer, I'm limited by having been there and all the things that I know. Diane Arbus had a way of saying that she said, a photograph is a secret about a secret, and the more that it tells, the less it reveals. So I'm going to show you this group of photographs. We're just going to kind of move through them quick, but I'm not going to tell you anything. Then I'm going to show you another group of photographs, and I'm going to say things about it. And then that'll open things up for discussion.
Can you move the microphone stand?
Oh yeah. Thank you. Okay, so yeah, let's roll through this. I'm going to try to stay quiet. That's the cover of Jack Bedell's book. Oops. So I think the vertical images kind of broke, so we can actually, work up to the end. It was challenging for me to stay quiet that whole time. There were several things I wanted to say, but I hope y'all enjoyed it. So if we can switch to the poem, the number 2 slideshow. It's important, I guess, for me to tell you that I've been taking photographs for, I guess, the past 23 years in Louisiana. So what I'm about to show you is a collection of images that kind of spans that time. And JC and I are going to try to collaborate on how to advance this. We built the city along the river for the resources that it could provide. We built houses of brick in houses of wood, in forts that were obsolete before they ever functioned. We went into the swamps. Often it felt like we were hanging on to the edge. We got yellow fever and suffered great loss. So we returned to the swamps and tamed them as we built bridges to carry cotton and sugar over land harvested by man and machine. Some built great wealth. Times changed and they lost it. The bottom part of this is a photograph that looks like it's hanging from that wire. So once again, we're hanging on. Hanging on under colorful, sagging roofs. So we missed the photograph. There it is. Often it felt like we were surrounded by water. The levees broke and led our paths into darkened churches. Conversations swirling in empty lots. Sometimes it felt like the earth was trying to take us back into the ground. Our lives turned inside out until we picked up the pieces and put them back together. Missed the photograph, maybe? We could go up, maybe one. Well, oh well. This backup one? Back the other way. Sorry. Well, we're having technical difficulties here, y'all. JC, are you able to reverse? No, you gotta step back a couple of images. Do one more. Okay. The humidity in the plants roared back as we harvested their ancient energies, always reaching for more. This is a photograph of a dead tree, and I'll say, with the questions of life always looming, questions of life and death always looming, one more? No, that's it. As the sun or the moon rises. Thank y'all for staying with me throughout that little bit of a technical challenge. So obviously, when I was trying to put words to images that were coming up on the screen, a little bit challenging, that changed the nature of what was happening. But I was hoping to kind of give y'all this narrative arc, how I can shape the images in a different way. But thanks for staying with that.
Yeah, I can do that. Thank you, Frank, for sharing that. And I feel like the same way that you were working on putting words to your images, I feel like I've been working on putting voice to my words. And so this is a similar project. It's a new project for me and thinking about, as someone who's a member of the United Women Nation, I work a lot with language reclamation and indigenous community activism in the city. And one of the things that happens a lot is people ask for land acknowledgements, or they want a better or richer understanding of what happens in this place. And this is my response to that. I think a lot of times, a lot of my work is thinking through perspectives of what we're thinking about, or how we talk about what's happening. And a lot of perspectives on a land acknowledgement are about trying to perceive what Indigenous people are here. And I'm interested in flipping that and thinking about why is everyone else here. And so this project is called A Colonial Shout Out. I don't know if JC can roll that beautiful bean footage. It's from YouTube. Yes. This is me. About that. Oh, it needs audio and dimming of lights a little bit.
Sorry about sound when you get back.
So while they're working on that, I'll talk a little bit more about this video. This is filmed out at St. Malo. So this is where the text, the visuals from this are coming from. The sound from this video is coming from, it's my audio, and it's also from another Mississippi Choctaw artist, Flowers Darling. She's a sound artist who does, she calls it like dark ghosts from the swamp. So she does new electronic synth music. But I met her through this project that we run called the Indigenous Gulf Stream. Part of that project is to think about not just Indigenous people as maybe they were, or this kind of, in this frame of colonial perspective, but thinking about Indigenous people as still here and still making weird art that doesn't necessarily have to connect with anything else. So the Gulf Stream is a project that happens every 2 years. It's a media biennial, and we collect new contemporary art from Indigenous communities in the Gulf South. Some of it is sound art, some of it is interviews, some of it is new films. And we stream them all in one 24-hour Twitch stream. It's incredibly temporal. You're only able to see all of the material for this 24-hour period. Yeah. And so it becomes this time, I think when we started the project, it was this idea of occupying time in the same way that we would like to occupy space. So in the same sense of land back, can we take time back? And so this is a project that I worked on. This was one of my contributions to the Gulf Stream, but it's also just a project. It's open source if anybody else wants to use it for land acknowledgements going forward. Thank you, JC.
Welcome to Wabancha. This land is and continues to be Indigenous lands. Today, the land holds more visitors, and we want to recognize. Here's some shout outs to that process. Shout out to the people who blew up the spot. Shout out to René Robert Cavier Sur de la Salle, a fur trader and ex-Jesuit missionary who went down to Venice, Louisiana in the crawfish season of 1683. He put up a cross and shot some guns for France. Shout out to France's boundless ability to build nations on complete trust when it's convenient, and stating that everything that came through the mouth of the Mississippi River belonged to Louis XIV's France because of La Salle. Shout out to Simon Lepage de Prats, an influencer/scholar who hung out in the Delta from the 1700s to 1734 and wrote the book that would solidify the, quote, Louisiana brand. Shout out to the process which sought this possession. Shout out to the brothers Pierre Lemoyne de Iberville and Jean-Baptiste Lemoyne de Bienville, who decided to post up in the Mardi Gras season of 1718 and just kind of live in the shared, seasonally flooded Indigenous gathering area, which they rebranded as New Orleans after their sponsor. Shout out to Sir Shepard for having the capacity to request that the whole city of Whiteapple, one of the largest Indigenous settlements in the lower Mississippi Valley, to move because he wanted to plant more tobacco. He pushed the Natchez to rise up for #landback around Black Friday of 1729. Shout out to the Treaty of Paris in the Mardi Gras season of 1763, which hard-launched Spanish control over a bunch of French stuff. That stuff included, quote, everything which France possesses or ought to possess in the Mississippi River Valley. Shout out to the Treaty of San Ildefonso, schemed in oyster season of 1800, where Spain returned the indigenous lands branded as Louisiana to Napoleon Bonaparte. Shout out to the Louisiana Purchase and U.S. going full send and signing a deed to buy indigenous lands which had been branded as Louisiana from Napoleon at the beginning of brown shrimp season in 1803. All of these treaties were done without North American Council consent or calumet. Shout out to the treaties. Or shout out to where are the treaties? Shout out to how essentially having a smoke and a barbecue with some French couch surfers turned into European nations doing the laundry and occupying the land and resources stewarded by existing North American civilizations. Shout out to the Pan-Turtle Island practice of collective pipe smoking and discussion as a relational and renewed practice of diplomacy. Shout out to the French Normans in Canada for naming the smoking practice the calumet because they thought it looked like the musical European instrument called the chalumeau. Shout out to the Quebecois Jesuit missionary Jacques-Francois Lesueur for documenting the process of the calumet sometime in 1685. He acknowledged it as a process of peace between nations, but he also labeled it a cult of which Christians should not partake. Thus, he pretty much said the whole continent's process of diplomacy was null to the Catholic Church. Shout out to Jacques Marquette for understanding the calumet and providing early written detailed descriptions of the importance of the calumet that informed the other explorers. Shout out for LaSalle for reading Marquette and knowing how to use the calumet. Shout out to St. Comte for using the calumet. Shout out to Charleville for using the calumet. Shout out to Iberville for making a fancy iron calumet in the shape of a ship with little beads and a fleur-de-lis on it. Shout out to the 8th United States Congress who just said no in the Mardi Gras season of 1804 and decided they couldn't be asked to uphold any of the calumet treaties that France and Spain made with the people of the territory they now decided that they owned. Shout out to ongoing dispossession. Shout out to Angola, aka Louisiana State Penitentiary, for posting up on an old home in Tunica Village and perpetuating chattel slavery. Shout out to Louisiana Tax Code for having some of the lowest taxes on outgoing petrochemical trade, leading to the loss of land through industrial terraforming. Shout out to the planners who dream of the systematic removal of everyone and everything south of I-10 so the land can be exploited for further industrial uses. Shout out to the Quai Branly Museum in Paris for having stuff, but allowing the stuff to continue to be out of relation to the communities currently living in the Gulf South. Welcome to our work, and welcome to our home. You can be in relation by speaking in the present tense and saying, this is the land of the, not this was the land of the. You can be in relation by helping us maintain an indigenous culture of refugee asylum, collective barbecues, cross-cultural communication, fluid, autonomous, multinational communities, and linguistic and political diversity. You can be in relation by knowing the past as it helps us build the present. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, JC. There's a second microphone there. It should be like on the stand. That way we can pass it back and forth. Oh my gosh, I'm just so moved and excited, y'all. One question I had queued up for y'all, but we can take it whatever direction we want, is what are some of the decisions that you make when choosing a form for a particular idea or message? Deciding this had to be a video and moving, deciding it to be a still image, and like how are you aware of your viewer or audience when you're doing that?
I think with me, one of the things I think, so, I'm, in my research, or when I was doing my master's in art, culture, and media, I was really thinking about this connection between cultural systems and media systems, and how do we communicate things, and why and what medium. And through that work, I really started to think about what we mean by the word culture. Again, going into the specificity of language. Culture can be kombucha, and culture can be a second line. And I think that definition is way too vast. And what we're usually trying to talk about when we're trying to talk about culture is that we're trying to talk about how we pass things on. Those things are specifically memory. And so when I think about articulating culture or generating cultural artifacts or art, what I'm really trying to think through is what memory systems are we trying to interface with? What memory systems are we trying to contribute to? What memory systems are we trying to repair? What memory systems are we trying to build or change? And so what I'm most interested in as an artist is thinking about the gap between what we have in our heads as the existing cultural memory system that we feel sort of this expectationship to contribute to, versus the way that we interact and exist on a daily basis. And I think that that gap is an immense amount of where we lose the ability for action and organizing. So while creating the colonial shout-out, what I was trying, this was actually, the colonial shout-out structure was not my idea. It came from another beautiful artist, Adriel Lewis. But what I really like about that structure is just framing and thinking about where people are. How do people talk about these things, rather than trying to take these expressions that are difficult to talk about, or just there's a lot of anger, or there's a lot of humor. Chris Pammelstein, after he watched this, he was like, it was kind of like watching a train wreck and then laughing about it. And I was like, that's pretty accurate. You know, it's just like there's a lot of intensity on this, you know, and if I was trying to transform that intensity into a memory system, like a journal article or some other poem that felt somehow removed from the way that I speak to people, I feel like there would also be content that wasn't being conveyed. And so the idea of doing a colonial shout-out, this idea of a shout-out, this idea of something that happens within lived culture, became a place where I didn't have to do as much transcription between my own emotions and the context that it was coming in. So I like playing around with that, and I like thinking and trying to build context for other artists too, to think about why are we translating things into these memory systems that we feel disenfranchised from, and what does it mean to take our memory systems and uplift them and making them meaningful for others.
Actually, you kind of inspired me to have an answer here. So, Turned Earth, my most recent book, is of my 5 books, absolutely my most personal. It is the one in which the first person pronoun, you can just go ahead and assume that in 95% of the poems, it's me, which is not necessarily the case in a lot of my other books, which have a lot of persona poems and other things going on. And there are a lot of reasons for that. It's a book about gardening and grief. My mother plays a big role in it, so I was definitely thinking about my experience. But now that I'm moving beyond that, and even when I was working on many of those poems, thinking about the fact that my perspective, my first person perspective, does not exist in a vacuum, and in fact it only exists because of being in a community of other people, right? And what I'm trying to work on now, which is a book of what I'm calling calling eclogues, so going all the way back to Virgil and thinking about that tradition of pastoral poetry. I'm trying to find like a way to do first person that is me, that is also open, that does invite the reader to be engaging with the word in a different way. That's a really vague kind of answer there, but like trying to find a different way to have a voice that invites me and the reader to engage with the world differently.
Your first person perspective in Turned Earth definitely invited me to engage. So so that way worked. I think it's interesting, the first person perspective. In some ways it feels so limiting, but in some ways the deepest honesty that we're able to offer anyone is our limited perspective. We're all stuck with that. And so no matter how much we want to bring in the outside perspective beyond ourselves, we're still bringing it in through the narrow window of ourselves. So it's interesting because the choice for me that you made in that book, Ross and I have talked about it, how you were able to turn us into, we were invited into this place that is you. It was very effective. Thank you.
Okay, everyone, I need y'all to do something for me. Close your eyes and just take a deep breath. Breathe in, breathe out, and breathe in, and breathe out again. Keep breathing in and out. Okay, that's our community.
Really.
You ready to say something? No?
I'm just floored. I can't believe you, that was just, how could you say this any better? Man, that's amazing. How did you, have you done this before?
Yeah, all my life. Well, I was a kid that when I was 8 or 9 years old, I would roll out the back window at 2 o'clock in the morning and walk out in the woods and climb a tree and just sit and watch and look and listen. So yeah, that's why I became a park ranger.
is bringing me back to a performance that by Mondo Bizarro, I think it was about a year ago, where it was called Invisible Rivers, and it took place on this beautiful parcel of lands and just used what? No,
Yeah.
is that far away? Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
But it just had so many ways of bringing the audience in. Like, you didn't just go to watch a play. And early in it, there was a part where they walked us to the edge of the water, and then Bruce was on a raft that was slowly pulled in by a rope, singing a song and playing an instrument. And it had a similar effect as this experience we just had was, where we weren't just you're a participant. You were in the space, you were examining the space, you were being forced to really feel the natural world, our environment. Can you speak a little bit to the making of that project or other ways that you... Yeah.
That was a fun one. It was, Mondo Bizarro and a bunch of, nerdy environmental people who like to get together and do stuff. But yeah, it was actually, they asked me what I wanted to do. We're all discussing, and like we're doing now, round tabling. And we were out in this space in St. Bernard Parish, so we're talking about how to engage the audience and what we're gonna say and all these things. And I was like, I don't really want to talk much. I want to hear what the trees have to say. They've been here the longest. I want to hear what the fungi, like what does it look like or feel to be there? And they were like, yeah, well, we're thinking you could canoe across the waterway, maybe roll up and say something. I said, no, I want to come across the water like Jesus. Come on, across the water. And it's a different perspective. You don't get to do that every day. So I was like, why don't I just glide across like on a platform? And so Jeff Becker said, oh yeah, I can do that. So we built this raft, and they had these ropes underneath the water, and then kind of glided across, playing accordion and playing some music. But no, I love to, it's what I was saying before, I like to be in a space and just become a part of it and get the perspective of like, what's it like to be there, not be invasive. Like we talk about invasive plants all the time, and how we're gonna get rid of nutrient, how we're gonna kill all the apple snails, and we're gonna bring in some other invasive animals to get rid of those, call it ice, because we feel like this has been invasive to us. It's like my grandma used to say, sit your ass down, shut up and listen. Which means like, be in a space, be quiet, and let it do something for you. So those are like ways we can get rid of stress, and we can get rid of egos that we have often when people, and I was a park ranger for a long time, so when people go into nature or in a wild space, they have an elevated heart rate. They're acutely aware of everything, and they have rapid breath because they're not used to being in a space where they're not in some kind of control in their mind. Instead of like becoming a part of it, it happens all the time. So it's a good practice, I think, to be in places where you're not in control, because it's not really true. It's like what's going on around us. Become a part of it. Let it show you how to be. Let it teach you. That's how I feel about nature. It always teaches us how to behave, how to act, and most of all, how to be humble and receive all of those parts that are just naturally there. So being able to take a deep breath if you're, in a wild space like with grizzly bears. You see them, they saw you first. They always see when you're doing what Frank does, when you're going out and photograph these wild spaces, everything there sees you. They know you're there. And it's like when these folks show up in a week and they're coming to threaten us. We know they're coming, we'll see them first. What are you going to do about it? It's always to get rid of the fear factor and the ignorance that is like saying that I need to be in control. No, you don't need to be in control. It's what we do with the Skull and Bone game. You're not really in control. Everybody's gonna be in the club. You next. Get over yourself. You're gonna get it. Now, how are you gonna do it? And what are you gonna do after this happens is a different story. So that's why I like to do projects like the one I did in Hope Cemetery. What does a grave digger really do? What is the actual process of what happens? These are like important things around the cycle of life, and what value system can we, receive from it? So I'm saying a lot of things at one time, but it's a part of it. So just becoming a part of something, like being in the words of music, is like a great thing.
I love that you brought up cycles. I've been thinking about recursion, and Brad was discussing this in gardening, and it's not like the way the environment works, the disasters at work, the rebuilding at work isn't linear. It's very recursive. Things go forward and back, and it's never going to be what it was. It's not a bad thing. It's never going to be what it was. It's not a matter of hitting stop, rewind. Like, it's very recursive, and I catch that in a lot of y'all's work. And I know, Jack, you and I have talked about this a lot, and I think the art of ekphrasis, where you create one piece of art after another piece of art, is sort of embodying that recursion. And I know you write a lot about Frank's photographs, and that seems like appropriate to sort of pull into this mix if you're up to it.
Yeah, nothing like the intimidation factor of sitting next to a rock star and discussing his music. So, talking about intimidating.
Bring it down a notch.
I don't even like to make sounds when I'm in his gallery. So, like, just sit here next to him.
Or like when the dog does something wrong, like you won't even look at him.
But, this notion of like sitting, like being in it, like actually being in it, that's how I feel in the presence of art, particularly Frank's photographs, because what he captures with his lens and what he lights is kind of what is home to, it's home. I mean, even the urban imagery it speaks to me in ways that, go beyond anything I could do in a poem. And so when I write about his work, what I'm trying to do, not only gain some empathy for it, but I try to resist reacting, because I don't want to explain it. I just want to be with it and explain like how I see what the camera saw, or how I've been in that place and I felt the reverence, and the camera managed to get really close to how I felt when I'm in that art. And so it opens a space for me to really have a conversation with his photograph. When I started doing that in the marathon, like sneaking into the Relle gallery and writing about the stuff, I never imagined a world where I'd like be in contact with him. And so I like had anonymity, and I could say anything without worrying about whether it was right or not. I don't know if you remember, but you pulled out a new photograph for me the last time I was in there, and I wrote about it. And I panicked, knowing, well, he's probably going to see this, and I could just look at this wrong. And that's part of my problem, is that when I write the poem, I can't worry about looking at it wrong. I don't know that there's any wrong in that situation. If you find yourself in the lake and there's 6 alligators near you, there's probably a wrong way to react to that. But in and of itself, there's nothing wrong. And that's kind of how I feel in the presence of his art, is I feel like I could thrash around and probably cause some problems in this, but it would be better if I just was here for a little and calmly took it in with every other thing. And so, the difficulty in writing about art, though, is its own accomplishment. Like, is honoring the accomplishment of the piece that I'm trying to interact with, and at the same time not just summarizing it or not just recreating it. And in doing so, I think I wind up adding what I what I can to it. And that's probably, as wrong as I might have been looking at some of Frank's photographs, I know I wasn't wrong about my honesty about it. So it comes down to that. It's a little different when it's a historical piece of music or dance or commonly kind of digested piece of art that I'm writing about, because I feel like I have some context to play around in. But when it's as personal as when the relationship is as personal as mine is to his photography, that context doesn't matter. So I know that's a circular way of talking about what you asked. It's, again, a moment of panic sitting next to the fan.
I mean, it's also just another way of bringing it to another audience. For us to see the paintings through the way you see them is moving. It changes, it might be, how do I say this? As a student and as a teacher, sometimes you hear the same thing 1,000 times, it doesn't click till somebody else just rephrases or retweaks it one way, and then you're like, oh. So I think response and playing with genre does that important work, for sure. And I know a lot of y'all have these very multi-genre kind of environmental pieces. And Frank, I have a question for you. There's a painting. I don't know, this might be insider knowledge.
I just want to respond to what Jack
yeah.
just now said for a moment, because people have said a lot of things about my work, but that was deeply moving for me, because Bruce, what you just did, where you opened us up to listening. Like for me, when I'm out making photographs, one of the things I realized is that in order to see, I have to listen first. And I have to shut my thoughts up for long enough that I can actually hear what's happening, and then I can start seeing, start trying to understand. And what you just now explained about how you're sitting with my work, you gave my work, you gave it the power of the natural world, like the power the natural world has for me. And for me, ultimately, that's what I'm trying to do. We all live very busy, doom-scrolling lives, and I am trying to make an image that can resonate strong enough that it would help people listen with their eyes. And that's what I heard you just now say. And so it's like, but the way that you described it, and then the fact that you're making your work with it, it's super powerful. So thank you. Thank you so much. Stacey, what you said?
There's a project you did recently where a photograph of an underpass was printed very large, taken to the swamp, hung in the same overpass, and then photographed.
Yeah.
Can you speaking of recursion and seeing things a new way, can you talk about that project a little bit, and then we'll open up to audience Q&A. So start thinking now, audience.
Yeah, it's so I was Stacey was really encouraging me to get my my multimedia things together on time so that we didn't have technical problems here. And I got sick and I was late getting this done. And that picture that she's talking about was supposed to be included in this. So I'm sorry that y'all can't see it, but yeah, as she's describing, I'm underneath the Atchafalaya Basin Bridge. I printed a photograph that I'd taken in the Atchafalaya Basin. I printed it 25 feet wide by 17 feet tall, so that it would fit in the opening between the pillars of the bridge. And then with a team of people, including Ross, who's here today, we went out there and we raised the photograph between the pillars of the bridge, and I photographed the installation. Also made like a video of this process to kind of reveal the installation. And there's once again, like when I start trying to talk about this project, I can quickly get into some really muddy territory and say things that contradict myself. But ultimately, there was power in taking an image of the natural world and using the frame of the bridge that is the engineered way that we live here, in marrying them together in all of their conflicts and Hali, help you out with the specificity of language here. Yeah. Anyway, I wish I could see the picture because ultimately the power of it is in the actual image. But it is on my website. It's called Under the Bridge. Red Hot Chili Peppers reference.
And it's literally a bridge, so we're talking about bridge and these
Yes.
different things. Oh, it's brilliant. What questions do you all have for us? Anybody? I can barely see, but if you wave a lot.
Questions, concerns, curiosities.
Yeah.
We got a microphone?
So, Bruce, you talked about being in the environment, being part of the environment in a way that's very real. I happen to know a little bit about Frank's process, so there's a connection there of being physically in the environment. So if you could talk for a second, Frank, about what that process is like, not in terms of the photograph that you make, but in terms of the experience of making it when you're in that water.
I wasn't completely paying attention when he asked me the question because my phone distracted me. But you asked if I could talk about what the process is like when I get in the water?
Yeah, not so much the what you're thinking about as you're making the photograph, but what being in the environment while you make it feels like, what that is for you.
Well, that's super important to me. One of the key factors in when I'm making my work is that I oftentimes jump out of the boat, I'm in a dry suit, and I get in the swamp. And so I'm either floating or I'm in the mud, and it's dark outside. And if I think about it, I would recognize that I'm foolish or terrified. But there's an immersive quality to the whole experience, and that immersiveness during a long exposure, sometimes I'm in the water for 7 and 8 hours a night, as I start to shift from my, I have a degree in cognitive science and philosophy from Tulane University, into I'm an animal, and I'm here with this tree, with this house, and I think that there's something to that. The other important part of my process is this, we call it the recipe on photo shoots. It comes from a documentary film called The White Queen. It's about a photographer looking for a snow leopard. And the recipe is revere what's in front of you, hope for nothing, delight in what crops up, have faith in poetry, be content with the world, and fight for it to remain. I've added one thing, take refuge as nature.
Any other questions? You don't have to use the microphone if you.
It's not a question. I think it's just a noticing. What you just said, could that also be a recipe for how to be with climate disruption?
Could that?
We're gonna let somebody else take that question.
Say that again, maybe.
She said, could that be a recipe to how to be with climate disruption?
Yeah, I was thinking about what you said. And I've been the last 4 years trying to make my way around and see some of the large river systems in the world. We had the Mississippi here. I had a wonderful opportunity to go to the Congo a couple of years ago, and the Amazon basin, both those places at the same time. And I was just in Egypt 2 weeks ago. I think that people have always disrupted things in certain ways that are like egregious in the historical perspective in time. It does increase, but at the same time, they've done some wonderful things, like you can go to the Amazon and find ancient garden systems that are still there, that are 10,000 years old. We have a lot of those things, maybe not quite as old here in South Louisiana, that maybe people planted years and years ago, that are like straight rows that we normally see when people cultivate things a certain way, but we are always in spaces where people have lived and disturbed the earth for their benefit. And not unlike what other animals do. They do the exact same thing. They don't use chemicals and they don't do a lot of crazy stuff that we do, but it is a part of the process. So I understand what you're saying about that. And, you know, I'm crawling around photographing fungi, for example. I just want to live in the moment and be into it so I can see what it's going to show me and teach me, and try and capture it the best I can, and you know, whatever f-stop I'm using, what's going on, that's part of it, but it's not the main thing. It's about being there and bearing witness to it and understanding that I am connected to the cosmos in that moment. And then I can really get into it. And it takes a little while to do that. Every time you're in nature, you have to reinstate yourself and become a part of it. And then the magical part starts, like what he's talking about. And there's always this striking moment where you realize, oh, I'm in it now. And I'm gonna try and hold this as long as I can without something going on that takes me out of it. And it can be just a short period of time, but once you realize that that's actually what happens, and you start to notice that other animals, like he was talking about with his gardening, you see the sow bugs, and you see everybody else is getting down, doing what they're doing, that you know that you're just a part of something that is so much larger than who and what we are as individuals, and that not to try and control it, but to understand all of the mechanisms and the moments that happen in it. So we can get into all these different media forms about how we share it, stop sharing it with other people. It's what birds sing. They might sing for territory, but they're really saying, say it. Y'all hear me, I'm over here in this corner, I'm singing my heart out. And I hear you as well. So when you do it together, or if you hear chorus frogs like we were hearing in that sound, I encourage you to go out in South Louisiana in the month of March and listen to the cacophony of life that's happening. Man, there's very few places where I get down like this. I tell you, I promise you. It's so full on, it's just like, it blow your mind if you just be quiet and let it happen and hear how much effort is going into it. That's how I felt about these pyramids I just saw. That was an amazing amount of effort going into building giant stone pyramids so people could be closer to the cosmos, to the sun, and have it come back down to them. You think about the 3 or 4 that are there, and then you find out there's like 129 of them. And that's not the only place on the earth that was happening simultaneously in Louisiana as it was in all these other places. And just to know that this is like where we actually are and what those processes are. And it comes from disturbing things and moving them around, but it's for the good and not for the destruction of it, hopefully. And it's about like having that effort. It's about knowing that when you're talking about getting rid of invasive plants, the main part of it, or animals, is to pass on the education of don't bring pythons, thank you Jesus, to South Louisiana and have it happen like they did in Florida, and then have people all day, every day, trying to show you that they can catch and get rid of hundreds of thousands of animals from a space. It ain't happening. You can do that all you want to, not getting rid of them. The education is, don't bring it here, turn it loose, don't flush it down your toilet, okay? That's the real deal. It's about the education and how to prevent it from happening as opposed to not letting it happen. That is exactly what's going on with ICE right now. You're dangerous. I don't want you here. You're going to do something. What? Clean up your backyard and fix your fence and give you a decent place to live while I can have a decent place? No. The fear factor is always that we have to like wipe it out and eradicate something. But it's around education to understand that how we all live together.
I have something to say about that too. It's just like, I think, again, with the specificity of language, I think when we use, I want to talk about the word wilderness or the wild when we're talking about that. The wilderness of something. And I think that that framing might need to be thought about a little bit. Is it really wild just because it's different? Is it a different memory or organization system that you haven't listened to enough yet to tell the chaos from the frogs? And so when we're thinking about how we're approaching things, I think oftentimes when we approach any situation or any culture that we're not familiar with, it sounds like a cacophony. Specifically, if you're going into a language environment that might be different, things feel like a different context or a different cacophony. It might feel like a wilder place to you. But that's only your own perspective of a cultural system that you may not fully know. And so the question then kind of contextualizes when we're using our words in this is like, how do we understand that we can only bring ourselves, everything that we see is only through the funnel of our own existence. And that existence is based on a language that was developed by a colony. And everything that we think or perceive when we're thinking or perceiving in English is coming through that or French. And then thinking through what am I wilding through my own experience that may just be me needing to listen to something else that I'm not familiar with.
I assume many of us know that the definition of a weed is simply a plant that isn't where you want it to be. Right? So you always kind of about those things. And that, if you're just, I can turn anything about gardening into metaphors, like, wow, if you're struggling to get your grass to stay green, maybe this grass doesn't belong here. And if you see something that is already here, like Biden's alba, which most people consider a weed, let it go. Let it do its thing and be beautiful and nourishing to things around it, and perhaps even to you.
I have a comment or a question. I'd like to ask Bruce to tell us a little bit more about this exhibit at the Cabildo Botanica. It's almost over, but it really speaks to what this conference is about right now.
Well, yeah, it is a kind of collective idea, similar to things that we're talking about. So it's a bunch of folks from across South Louisiana for the most part, including Tammy Gray, who has a medicine wheel garden in Alabama, which is a Native American system of planting old terra preta land, which is kind of what I was alluding to when I was talking about ancient gardens, and I'm really interested in those around the world. But collective of gardeners from veggie gardens out in New Orleans East, where the Vietnamese community has been growing wonderful stuff for a long time. But it's a dive into not just gardening, but in the collecting and eating food sense, but wild stuff like I photograph, like medicinal plants, gardens in the French Quarter, Longview Garden, all these things. How do we use that concept? So Botanica is around that. It's down there at the Cabildo. If y'all get a chance to go in there and check it out, it's a wonderful exhibit. So it's one of those really fun things to do. And we used to have a lot more Botanica stores around this area than we do now. Some of them have faded away, but people are getting back into not just ordering things on Amazon, or if you do have a Botanica, I always encourage folks to understand what's in your own backyard. Like, this is a time to go out and collect Mungier Siro, which is bacchus, grows all over the place around here. It's one of the best things that you can make a tea out of for like flu, for head cold, anything. Grows everywhere around here. So there are lots and lots of medicinal plants right now that are available, and it speaks to gardening in general, even if it's the type of plants, looking at how many different exotic plants that we brought in that have been in Louisiana now, especially in the city landscape of New Orleans in the French Quarter over the last 300 years. So.
Thank you for asking that question. We are at the end of our show, folks, but thank you so much for being here. There are books available in the bookstore. I'm sure these authors would sign them for you. Up next, we have Naturally New Orleans hosted by Maurice and Carlos Ruffin. That'll be at 4:15 or 4:30. Thank you all so much, and it was great to have you here.